Very pleased to be here tonight. I hope you all can hear me in the back. Yes, good. I want to thank John for inviting me to present a different kind of presentation to you tonight, a presentation dealing with some of the deeper inner aspects of this reality of contact and things that we need to know and already do know. I would like to begin in a reverent manner with a prayer, and to include you in that prayer, and invite you to take a moment of silence within yourself after such a big day of important information to share this prayer experience with me. It's very important that we are here together. It is very important that we have a connection to something greater in the world, to life within the world and to life beyond the world. May we have the courage and the open-mindedness to venture more deeply into this mystery that stays with us always. And may we venture into this mystery without foolish hope or fearful denial, trusting in a power within us that the Creator of all life has given to us, to see the truth, to know the truth, and to act upon the truth. May that presence be with us tonight in our time together. Thank you. I know the data is fascinating, and it continues to be fascinating and troubling, but there is a deeper connection that I think it's important to remember. A connection that keeps us looking at this mystery, this pervasive mystery of our lives, that often seems to have very little relevancy to our normal daily activities. A kind of mystery that our friends and family perhaps don't want to hear about. And you can think of the many attempts perhaps you've made to share this with them, and they don't want to hear about it. They don't want to go there. But going there is so important. And so we return once again. That we live our life, our normal life, our daily life, and yet we have this other life, this other connection that we keep coming back to. And it makes living a normal life rather difficult. Is that true? Sometimes it makes living a normal life rather difficult and strange. That we have a normal life, but we have this other life connected to this phenomenon, this reality, this idea of life in the universe, and the understanding that that life in the universe in some form or another is already present within our world. This is about spirituality now. And spirituality is the important component that I would like to share with you tonight to some degree. Because this isn't just an interest. This isn't just a fascination. This has something to do with who we are and why we're here. And that is what makes it so inexplicable. Because it's not just about what's out there and what's going on. It's about what's going on inside that connects us to this mysterious, frustrating, irritating, fascinating thing that doesn't go away. And it doesn't go away because it's real. You know it's real. Other people don't seem to know it's real, but somehow you know it's real because you have a connection to it. Now, for me, that means that you have a spiritual connection to it. This isn't just about information for the mind. It's not just about solving a mystery. There's something deeper here. For many of you, most of you, perhaps even all of you. And I speak of this because this deeper aspect of us ultimately is going to hold the key, not only to what this means for us individually, but what this is going to mean for all of us collectively. In my writings about greater community spirituality, and by greater community I mean the reality and the spirituality of life everywhere, what is fundamental to intelligent life everywhere. Two things happen for me. One is facing the reality of life in the universe, and the other is facing what it means for me. Outside, inside. And as I proceed in my presentation with you tonight, I'm going to talk more about this reality inside and why it is so essential for us now to understand, to know what it is, and to how to use it effectively. James Carrion last evening said a very important thing. He said that we must penetrate the mystery of this UFO phenomenon within our lifetime. And within myself, I said, yes, that's right. Because this isn't a mystery that will always be a mystery. In fact, for me, I don't consider this to be a mystery. I consider it to be a natural and highly consequential event. I consider it to be a puzzle that's missing some large pieces. Such large pieces that we're not really sure what we're looking at. It's a puzzle without any referring picture. So all you have is pieces and no picture to know how to put the pieces together. But I believe that the picture is becoming clearer, even if we don't have all the pieces. And tonight I'd like to talk about some of those missing pieces with you. My work as a teacher of meditation, inner guidance, as a theologian, as someone who's exploring the religious implications of this phenomenon, has brought me to some very difficult thresholds. Paul Davies, who won the Templeton Prize for Religion in 1997, who wrote about the implications on religion of this phenomenon, said that the reality of thinking beings in the universe will have all the religions rethinking their position. What is he really saying? He's really saying that one of the biggest impediments to bringing this out to people is religion. Because our religions are based upon an anthropocentric notion that there is God, humanity, and the world. But if this is our God and the God of others in the universe, then it's like we have to start all over again. Our theological beliefs, our great assumptions, all thrown into doubt and question. This is how important this subject is, I believe, to us. I feel that our emergence into this greater community of intelligent life, which includes contact with other forms of intelligent life, is the most consequential event in human history and will likely determine the outcome for humanity for decades and centuries to come. It is the most dangerous event in human history. It is the greatest opportunity in human history. And that is why we feel and we know it is so important, even if it interferes with our individual lives, plans, and goals. In 1983, I had, for want of a better word, an epiphany, a contact with a spiritual presence so powerful that it completely blew up my life. This wasn't a still small voice experience. This wasn't a little voice in the ethers. This was a consuming presence. And I had been teaching inner guidance for 7 years prior to having this experience. So I thought I understood what this was going to be or what this was. And one of the consequences of this encounter, which continued for me, was the idea, the message, that we are emerging into a greater community of life and we must prepare. That our understanding of contact is not an adventure in consciousness. It is not a science project. It is the big thing, the big rumbling, the big change that many people, I'm sure many of you, have been feeling for a long time. This sense that the world we live in is going to go through some kind of fundamental shift or change. And we feel that inside of ourselves. So much so that I'm sure many of you have had to redo your life internally, maybe several times over, because you're moving towards something that is important. You're trying to get to a place of understanding. While everyone else is looking for comfort and consolation, you keep pushing the envelope, trying to put it together. As a result of this contact, I received Steps to Knowledge, a 500-page book in 14 days. I received Greater Community Spirituality, the Theology of Contact, 27 chapters in 4 days. This was material I had never read anywhere, heard anywhere, or seen anywhere. And it was this presence that prepared me for contact with the allies of humanity and enabled me to receive the 2 series of briefings between 1997 and the year 2000. It was not an experience that I wanted to have. I had seen some other channeled material with extraterrestrials, and I was not very impressed. But this happened, and I allowed it to happen. And because of this, the Allies of Humanity briefings are here today. I'm going to share some of these briefings with you tonight. After saying a few words, I'm going to show a little audiovisual presentation. And I'd like to ask you for this evening, for the time being, to just consider the result of this message, which is far bigger than anything I could present to you in the time that I have with you tonight. It's easy to question the phenomenon of receiving something like this, and I certainly have questioned that myself. But by their fruits you shall know them, and therefore I ask you to consider the results of this. For me, the Allies' briefings gave some of the big missing pieces. I can't say I gave all the missing pieces, but you don't need all the pieces. You just need enough of the pieces to see the picture of the puzzle. In this case, that's the goal, is to see the picture. What is this? I realized that there were 4 fundamental questions about the extraterrestrial presence in the world. What is happening? Why is it happening? What does it mean? And how can we prepare? The incredible work that MUFON and other organizations have done over the past decades has given us a very solid understanding, I think, of the first question. We know that we're being visited. We know that intelligent beings from beyond the world are here operating in the world without human consent, engaged in a number of very specific activities, and they represent many different cultures and races. And certainly the recording of this evidence has been very fundamental to our being able to go on to the next three questions. The next three questions are more difficult because we cannot rely upon science alone to answer them. They require other avenues of knowledge, other ways of knowing. They also require that we deal with ourselves. Rather than just being the witnesses of a great phenomenon, we're somehow implicated in this phenomenon. We're part of it. We're the first respondents to it. We're witnessing it. It has something to do with who we are and why we're here. The second three questions, particularly the last question, are really difficult because where the hard facts end, it's all wide open. You just make it be whatever you want it to be. And people have made it be whatever they want it to be. But the first question is to lead us to the next three. And some of the pieces to the puzzle are not about the first question. They're about the questions that follow. Why is it happening? What does it mean? How can I prepare? The fourth question, no one seems to have a clue how to prepare. Or is there even a need to prepare? No one seems to know how to prepare. What does it mean? That can be known, but I think you would have to look at it without fear or preference, which is something that's very hard for us human beings to do with anything. Why is it happening? The evidence does give us some important clues, and I will talk about that as we proceed. I'm not going to talk tonight about whether UFOs are real, except to say they're real. I want to take us beyond UFOs are real. Who needs to hear that UFOs are real is everybody out there in the culture. But I think everyone knows here that that question has been very, very aptly answered. I also am not going to talk about the government tonight, because I think Linda Moulton Howe spoke very intelligently about that. It's been presented many times. There's been a lot of very good work done on this. Except to say that the government seems to be schizophrenic on this subject. On one hand, it maintains avid denial or ignorance. On the other hand, it leaks out things to try to educate us that visitation is occurring. Every time you see a film or a movie that has military equipment in it, like bases and tanks and all these sorts of things, that's because the Military Film Review Board has given their stamp of approval. You can't go out and rent that stuff without that approval. So clearly there's a schizophrenia here that on one hand this isn't real and isn't happening or isn't important. On the other hand, we kind of want people to be acclimated to this. So there's an odd dichotomy there. I think there are individuals within the government who know this is real and who support the extraterrestrial presence, and there are those in the government who know it's real and who do not support the extraterrestrial presence, and they both have reasons for denying any kind of disclosure, but for different reasons. And the last thing I'll say about this is getting the government to disclose anything, I think, is pretty hopeless. But that doesn't mean we should be hopeless, because there are ways of knowing what the government isn't telling us anyway, and there may be ways of knowing what the government doesn't even know. So it can simply be bypassed, rather than us waiting around for years and decades for it to tell us what we think it knows, which it won't do. Okay, good. Tonight's talk is about the alien agenda and the ethics of contact. I want to talk about the agenda first, and I'd like to begin with saying that in order for us to understand this agenda most fundamentally, we need to not approach it as philosophers, scientists, humanists, sociologists, to not look at this from the position of our interest or expertise and study it from that position. That's fine to do, but first we have to look at it at a very fundamental level. And that fundamental level is we have to look at it from the standpoint of being the native peoples of this world. We are the native peoples of this world. You may feel like you're from somewhere else, but we're still the native peoples of this world. And we are facing an intervention from beyond our world. If we do not look at it at this level, we may miss the most important clues, and we will miss the most important questions that have to be answered. And we will also miss what both nature and history has taught us about intervention. These are important points that would be missed if we're simply approaching this from a scientific or philosophical or theological perspective. The native peoples. And what life has taught us in this world about the native peoples and their encounters with foreigners or other, in this case, other races of beings, but to go back and read the record of intervention is very important because it gives us clues about the agenda that the extraterrestrials are exercising now. And these clues are being borne out by the evidence that is being generated through the research from MUFON and other organizations. And that we, as the native peoples of this world, have certain rights and responsibilities, certain ethical rights and responsibilities. That if these are not recognized, if they're not honored and exercised, then we are putting ourselves in a position of being the unwitting recipients of whatever an intervening force wants to do to our world or to us, which is pretty much exactly how it is right now. We have no authority, we're given no authority, either by our governments or by the extraterrestrial presence itself. We can only witness and try to understand. That is not a good position for the native peoples of the world. We also have other predispositions that make us very weak as the native peoples of the world. We're very fascinated with technology. We think advanced technology somehow equates to advanced consciousness. That those who can do things we can't do must be spiritually, psychologically advanced far beyond us. And we love trinkets of technology, don't we? And we hope for technology to be brought to our world to solve our ecological, environmental, political problems. But the lessons of history and nature would warn us against that. After all, fundamentally, regardless of who you think you are and what your name is and your own personal history, you are a biological creature in this world, subject to the laws of nature, all of us. And nature tells us that there's competition always for environment, and that superiority or predominance anywhere is motivated by very fundamental forces, be they productive or destructive. And that we of the natives of the world have to make some fundamental ethical decisions. For example, we need to determine who can come to this world and what they're able to do here. This is our responsibility. I talked about this at another conference some time ago, and a young lady came up to me afterwards. She said, well, this isn't really our world. I mean, you know, the aliens planted us here. It's kind of their world. We're just sort of get to be here until they come back to claim it. That's kind of like, it's a good form of manifest destiny. It's, you don't really get to own what you own. We actually own it, but we'll let you think you own it until we need it. This is our world of origin, is our God-given world of origin. If we give it away or let it be taken away, we are responsible for that. The lessons of history, the lessons of intervention cannot be overlooked. And they are being overlooked. The Allies of Humanity briefings talk about the 4 fundamental activities of the extraterrestrial agenda. And I should say about the Allies, and you're going to see this in the slideshow, that this group of individuals, not visiting our Earth, but are witnessing the extraterrestrial activities here on Earth from a point beyond the Earth, and have sent us a report. Because we can't be on the outside looking in. We're only on the inside looking out. And therefore, we cannot fill in those missing puzzle pieces because we're on the inside looking out. We don't know what's going on beyond our planet. And we're not in a position to see that. So the 4 fundamental activities, and I like to list them, and you can read about these in greater detail in reading the Allies briefings. In fact, the first set of briefings of the Allies of Humanity the entire book is online. You can read it at your leisure, and it goes into great detail about each of these 4 activities, which I'm not going to do tonight. The first is establishing liaisons with leaders in government, commerce, and religion. Not all leaders, certain leaders, certain receptive leaders, particularly leaders who are ambitious, who would very much like to have a connection beyond this world and the technology it could provide and the expertise it could provide in order to fulfill that individual or that group's agenda. It's often been proposed that who's opposing the extraterrestrial presence are all the business elites, the networks of greater financial power in the world. But this really doesn't hold up, because those are the very elements that the intervention will seek to reach and to persuade. And who amongst them could refuse advanced technology, advanced methods of mind control, advanced propulsion? Who amongst them could refuse a temptation like that? What entrepreneur would turn down something like that? To be given an assured supremacy. The second area of activity is building a physical presence in the world. And this is one out of logistical necessity, particularly as we're getting a little more sophisticated about seeing what comes in and out of the planet, its atmosphere, but also to further a process of assimilation. And we shouldn't underestimate the process of assimilation, because just walk in any toy store and see E.T. toys. Your 4-year-old's playing with E.T. toys and watching E.T. cartoons and stuff. The next is manipulation of spiritual values and tendencies. This is a very big subject, which I cannot talk about in depth tonight. But there's no accident that in the last 40 years, if you've seen a new religious thought, the religion of acquiescence and passivity, trusting in the process, whatever happens is what needs to happen. Everyone's right where they need to be. If the extraterrestrials are here, it's because they're supposed to be. You don't resist, you acquiesce. To resist is to be negative, is to be fearful, it's to be unconscious. Great prescription for convincing the natives to give over the keys to the kingdom. Very good, clever form of manipulation. And the fourth activity is interbreeding. A very long, drawn-out process to create a hybrid individual capable of establishing a new leadership here. Not in alliance to humanity, of course, but into alliance to foreign powers, with allegiance to that foreign powers. The protests now come saying, well, if they want it, they can just come and take the planet. But no, that's not what an intelligent race would do. That's what a brutish race would do. Because what they want are the resources of the world. And the intervention represents a very small, non-military organization. Probably the best analogy would be to sort of a multinational corporation. And multinational corporations now do conquests sending out men in business suits with laptops and cell phones. Those are the conquistadors of today. Some of you are aware of this whole abduction phenomenon. When you really begin to look at it, not romantically, it's pretty onerous. It's pretty diabolical, actually. And for those abductees who will not be turned, their life is a torment and a hell. Socially alienated, psychologically damaged. Their life is a hell. A very well-known researcher whose name I cannot share due to his request, who's also an abductee, said to me once, as we were walking to University of Colorado where he's going to give a presentation, he said, you know, to them we're nothing more than cockroaches. I thought that was pretty extreme. But we are the native peoples of the world. And how the conquistadors looked at native peoples of the world in several ways. They were impediments, they were useful tools, and they had to be managed and in some cases eliminated or completely governed. They were sinful, they were chaotic, they were destructive. When you look at the evidence of the intervention we're experiencing today, you begin to see the same kind of elements. The denigration of human leadership and institutions, which is easy to do. The denigration of human potential. The assertion that without an extraterrestrial intervention, we will destroy ourselves. We are hopelessly destined to self-destruct. And that our own pathetic behavior demonstrates, that we cannot manage the planet. And that we need others to help us and to show us how. Now, some people say this is a very negative way of looking at it. I don't feel that way. I think it's a very objective way of looking at it. From the standpoint of being a native person of this world who's been completely disempowered by the extraterrestrial phenomenon and seeing everyone around him completely disempowered and trying to accept that in some way or making excuses for it, I see that we're moving into a position of tremendous vulnerability and powerlessness. How did Cortez, with his 550 men, overtake a nation of 2 million people, the most powerful military nation in the Americas, the Western Hemisphere? It wasn't through advanced technology. It wasn't through power. It was through guile and just taking advantage of the native superstitions, their own divisions, their own conflicts. Pizarro was 168 men overcoming a nation that extended for 3,000 miles. Tells us in the lessons of intervention, this world could be overtaken by a very small expeditionary group, exploiting the native superstitions, conflicts, and self-doubt. These are the lessons of intervention. They're appropriate here because we're experiencing an intervention. We can't call it a visitation. A visitation is where the host grants permission for the guest to enter, understands the purpose of the guest being there, understands their intentions, accepts these things, and his permission is granted. Well, nothing like that has ever happened. And to say that someone somewhere gave them permission doesn't mean anything. Nor is there any human permission for all the myriad of extraterrestrial activities occurring in the world today. We hope it's okay. I'd like to take this one step further. And I'm not saying this to scare you, because my purpose tonight is to engender wisdom and responsibility. We, as the human family at this time, are beginning to experience what I call the great waves of change. The great waves of change being largely the product of human behavior, but not entirely so. Immense changes that are going to affect our environment, our civilization, our way of life, our survivability. This has, irrespective of any kind of extraterrestrial presence here, I'm talking about a global energy crisis. We are overgrazing the fields. We're talking about global warming, violent weather, the disruption of food production, the exposure of people living in coastal areas, which accounts for 40% of the world's people. We're talking about the rise of pandemic illness. Now, I've taken the time to really look into these things because it's easy to just say, oh, it's all corporate manipulation, or we've heard all that before. But when you look at this, really look at it, just like the extraterrestrial phenomenon, it becomes very real. And it gets under your skin. And you begin to have a response. Now, just dealing with the great waves of change is going to take a monumental human effort, which has not arisen yet, and which may not arise until the very bitter end. I bring it up here tonight because it does fit into the alien agenda. And it fits in with the alien agenda remarkably well. For if humanity, due to its own misuse of the environment, its own negligence and irresponsibility, denigrates the environment enough, leading to the decline in civilization, leading to immense conflicts, it's very possible and often very likely. Then here, this intervention, which has been building its network of representatives and apologists, and you must admit, the extraterrestrials have many admirers and very few critics. When you recognize that the intervention has established its physical presence, has been developing its own leadership, who then can assume positions of power or advisory positions of power. And humanity puts itself in such a position of decline, such a position of instability, we will accept help from anyone or anything. Especially if we've been conditioned to believe that the extraterrestrial is here to save us and will give us all this amazing technology and free energy and all kinds of other things. We will not turn that down. They have only to wait till we drive ourselves into the ground. And who amongst us and who amongst our leaders would decline the offer of their help? Those who have helped to lead us into this situation, those who have supported the decline of human civilization, will now appear as the saviors of humanity. And whether this is done publicly, visually, or whether this is done behind the scenes in a seamless transfer of power, if you begin to connect the dots, if you begin to see the connections, it becomes very clear. If you know the lessons of intervention and you see how very small forces have been able to overcome very large forces, then you can begin to see how possible this is and how likely it truly is. This creates for us an ethical crisis as well as a practical one. For we are not in a position to establish what is right for us, what the rules of engagement should be and must be. We don't even see a need for it. We're still just sitting in the audience watching the show. We don't realize we are the show. This is it. Until this extraterrestrial presence demonstrates beyond a shadow of a doubt that it is here for a beneficial purpose and that it reveals its purpose and intentions. Until this is proven beyond a shadow of a doubt, then we must suspect it for the purposes that intervention has always served, which has been self-interest, power, and control. Because that is the lessons of nature, and that is the lessons of history. As above, so below. Amazingly, this intervention is the one thing that can unite humanity and save us from our own decline. Is there a silver lining to this? Yes. Because every person in the world will face the same consequences if this intervention succeeds. There'll be no winners. There'll be no beneficiaries. Even those who are promised positions of power and supremacy, they will never be given the keys to the kingdom again. This is a cause for human unity. What do we hope to gain in our conflicts with one another? What do we hope to achieve in some kind of national supremacy for the United States or any nation if we're all facing a global intervention? It's being carried out in a surreptitious manner without human awareness or consent. We are all in the same boat. We are one humanity with one spirituality, facing a dilemma that will affect us all equally. If this could be seen by even a small number of people, this would begin to reverberate through the whole culture. Because our greatest threat, our greatest challenge now, is with the greater community itself. The Allies say that for emerging races such as our own, the first encounter with intelligent life in the universe will be with resource explorers and economic collectives, almost without exception. As above, so below. The intervention, I believe, gives us the one great opportunity to overcome our long-standing conflicts and issues with each other, person to person, nation to nation, for the defense of the world. And it's difficult for me as a spiritual teacher to talk like this. But what could be more spiritual than showing people a great need and showing them something that's undermining their safety and their future. It's not what we want to hear. I would love to think that they're here to help us, and we sure need them, and look what's happening in the world, and we won't make it without them. But I know it's not true. Damn. And the great presence that came to me and has been with me and has enabled me to bring a greater community understanding into the world is telling me and telling all of us, we are merging into a greater community of intelligent life. We must prepare. It is time to prepare. And my work basically is to alert people to our destiny, our future in the greater community, and to our responsibilities as an emerging native race in the greater community. And to provide part of the preparation, at least, part of the answer to the final question of how can we prepare. Because we have to prepare on the inside as well as the outside. If we can't see, if we can't know, nothing will happen.